All right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Are any of you Scott who emailed me? Cool. All right, I guess I'm going to say, are you Scott? Maybe. Scott? Yes. Cool. Perfect timing. Scott's got something to say.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, no problem.
And apologize for being just
Perfect timing.
2 minutes late here. So when we're out here building all kinds of cool stuff, that I think there comes a time in everybody's life where we need to give back just a little bit. And I'm part of a group called Open Indy Brigade, where our mission is to just give back to the community in a tech kind of way. So, like other groups that go out and maybe clean up an alleyway or plant some trees, during a Saturday morning, we're here to go out and improve our community with tech, and so we have created a partnership with both the state of Indiana, the state government, as well as city government. And we've created a civic hack day on June 16th and 17th. We've got flyers that I'll leave here with you guys. Where whether it's you guys or people can come out and help our community, help the people in government work better in terms of their tech approach. So as you probably know, most government services are kind of clunky and inefficient. Anybody experience that for yourself, of course. And so what we're here to do is to give them input and help them bring new technologies and new approaches to government services. So the Civic Hack Day is one day where we can get a bunch of folks from government and the tech community together and help each other. Because of course, we want a better community, and the government wants, more efficiencies and to do things better. So the city of Indianapolis has come up with a really cool idea, I think, this year. We've run this for the last 4 years, and the city has really kind of bought into this now. And what they're doing is they have a lot of different services offered through this thing called request.indy. And you guys probably have never heard of it. But it's ideas like, hey, if there's a pothole that needs to be patched, or there's a neighbor lot that needs to be cleaned up or whatever, you can kind of request city services. Well, it doesn't work very well. And they're going to go out and redo it. But they want your input, our input. And so part of the Civic Hack Day is going to be to take a look at city services and say, hey, how can we engage citizens in a better way? How can we do this in a better way? And it's amazing because for once, the mayor in the city is really requesting everybody's input. So this isn't just about coding, although it is, definitely a codathon, and they want everybody's input and approaches to that sort of thing. But if you guys know any product managers, or if you're an aspiring product manager, or if you know somebody who's really into UX, or if you're really into UX and think you can do it better than the typical UX people, come on out and spend some time. You can win some money and really help your community. So appreciate the time and the opportunity to tell you about this. I'll leave some flyers here. But if you want to tell your friends, your family, other people you know, please come out. We'd love to have you register. There's an Eventbrite page. It's June 16th and 17th. And come on out. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, who has heard of Indy Civic Hack Day before? Who has participated before? Cool. Well, that's great to hear.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have any other announcements other than next month we have a meetup scheduled, and it's the film screening that we're doing with GDI, Girl Development Indy. It's about It's called Debugging the Gender Gap. I wanted to get the title right. So I think it'll be really cool. It's a collaboration with girl developer Indy. So we're going to be in this space watching this movie, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. Hopefully you guys can make it out for that. After that, we don't have, after next month, we have no other meetups scheduled yet. So if you have something that you would like to present, let me know. Shoot me a message on Meetup. And that's it. That's all I've got. So let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
All right, thanks. All right, hello everybody. My name is Kevin. I work for a company called Bitovi, which is mentioned here. We do JavaScript consulting. We also maintain a bunch of open source libraries. One of those is CanJS, which I'm going to talk about today. We're going to go through kind of our introduction guide, which is about building a real-time chat application. So I posted the link to this guide in the Meetup page if you want to follow along. There's some code you can basically copy and paste, and then everything is working out of JS bin, so you don't need to install anything. It should be pretty easy. All right, so the way that this guide is kind of set up is you can see the list of steps here. Each step basically has kind of the goal, and then the code that you actually want to, it's basically the answer, and then at the end it kind of explains what you've done. So I'm kind of going to use the same approach. So for the first step is the setup. So what we want to do is basically get a JS bin working with CanJS loaded. So all you got to do is open this JS bin, and then go to File and click Clone. That way you have your own copy. You're not editing something that other people can see. All right, so we're basically going to be working on HTML, JavaScript, and then this is the output. If you haven't used JS bin before, that's kind of how it's laid out. You can click these buttons to show or hide different things. So what this JS bin gives you is one CSS file that's got Bootstrap CSS so that it'll look pretty. It's loading jQuery, then our CanJS library, and then Socket.io. So in the JS bin, to use CanJS, you're basically there's a global can that this script exports. If you were actually using CanJS in a real application, you probably wouldn't want to do it that way. You'd want to use our individual libraries and a module loader, and either use like this is using CommonJS syntax, or you can use ES6 or whatever kind of module syntax you want. But for the guide, we'll do can dot all of these things. So, all right. So the next step is kind of the hello world of CanJS. We want to display some dynamic data and then handle events from the user. So what we'll do, I'm going to kind of live code some of this, and then when I screw up, I'm going to copy and paste the answer from the guide. So what we want to do is first make a template in CanJS. That's CanStash is our kind of templating language. It's based on mustache, so use curly braces like this for displaying data. For using that in JS bin, you can create a script tag that has type of text/stash. You can give it an ID. Feel free to stop me and ask questions as I go on. All right, so what we want to do is display a message. All right, so that's kind of the simplest thing in the template that we need. And then in our JavaScript, we're going to make a type that defines what our dynamic data is going to look like, and also sets up our methods that we want to use for event handling. So to do that, we can create a constructor function. Using can define map, which is basically a way to create a type where you define the properties that your type is going to have. So what we want to have is a message property that's going to be a string, and that's going to have a default value. We can just say maybe calculus. And then basically what we want to do is create an instance of this type and then render this template using that data. So we can make a lowercase one of these by calling new on our constructor that we just created, and then we can load our template by using canvas-stash.from, which is really just the JS bin way of doing this. That will, so this basically will look for a script of type text equals or text/stash in our page with that ID, and it will create a function that you can use to render that. So you can create a document fragment, or basically you can think of this like HTML by calling this template, passing it the data that we want to render the template with. So I can then hopefully put this in the page, doing something like that. If I click run, we see that gets displayed, but it's very tiny and it doesn't do anything. So what we can do is put this inside of our one. It's a little bit bigger, still doesn't do anything. So the other thing we wanted to do, like I said at the beginning, was handle events from the user. So what we want is if, say, you click on this H1, we want to add an exclamation point. So we can handle a click event by using this syntax. So these parentheses basically mean it's an event, and then the dollar means it's a DOM event. You can have other kind of jQuery events or data events or whatever that wouldn't have a dollar. And then when that happens, we want to call a function. And we'll call that add excite. Over here on our type, we can create that method that when that gets called, it's going to take the message and add an exclamation point. Cool. It's not as pretty as it should be because I don't have Bootstrap styles memorized, so I'm going to paste this in now and it'll look a little prettier. All right, cool. That's what we wanted. Cool. Very exciting. All right, so this is kind of the basics of any CanJS application. We created a type where we define our properties and our methods that we want to use in the template. We then rendered the template, and this type is observable so that whenever your properties on that type change, your template changes. You've seen this in probably every JavaScript framework, but this is how you do it in CanJS. Cool. All right. So then next thing we want to do is some basic routing. So in your JavaScript applications, you have multiple pages. You want your users to be able to toggle between them by clicking buttons or when data changes or whatever. So we're going to add some routes. So we will place this message with where we're going to handle the routes. So CanStash has some helpers. One of these is equals or EQ, and you can basically say if the page is home and I want to show something, you say show home, and then if it's not, we can show chat. This is basically how you do an if-else statement in the template. We can also, there's also some helpers for creating links. So we want to create, from each page, we want to be able to link to the other page. So we can say, instead of saying our href is something like chat or whatever, this is what it would kind of actually be. We want to build that. We want to have the framework build that route so that if we change how our URLs are laid out or we change the name of our pages, it'll automatically figure that stuff out. So there's a helper called route URL that we can use. And then let's say page equals chat. All right. Then from the home page, we link to the chat page. From the chat page, we link back to the home page, and you should be able to click on these. So then in our JavaScript, what we need to do to make this work is we need to first define this page property that we created. So we will do that. We'll just say page, and we'll just give it a type of string. It does the same thing as if you pass an object with the type of string. It's just kind of the shorthand. We don't need a default value here, so we'll just do it like that. And then what we want to do is basically, in CanJS, the routing is all tied to your type, so your application view model. So what we want to do is say can.route.data. So basically the data that's going to back our route is our FVM. That way, when the VM data changes, the route will change. When the route changes, it'll update the FVM. It's basically the way of syncing those up. And then we want to actually define a route. So our route is going to look like this. So it's basically going to be, if you're using push state routing, it's like /home would be your route. If you're not, it's like I said before, like the hash bang. Then we can also give it some default data. Say our default page is going to be the home, and then we can say in that route ready, which basically means we've defined all of our routes and we're ready for the CanJS to take over the routing system. So if I display this, if I do this, something is broken. Sorry? I don't think that actually matters. But you're right that I should just copy all that because it's more complicated. I'm just going to paste it in because it's a little bit, it's got all the styles and stuff. But, oh, so that works. So now if you toggle between the two, we got home and chat. And we noticed that, or I noticed that our default message is gone. And the reason that is happening is that in order to create the routes, what CanJS is doing is basically serializing all of this data. So it's going to take any properties on here and try to turn them into a URL. And our message isn't a part of our route, so it's deleting that. So we want to say when we serialize this, don't include the message property. Well, that's kind of confusing, but basically on your app VM, any properties that you don't want to affect the URL, you don't want serialized. So that's what this is doing. Cool. So now we can see that this is toggling back and forth. Since we're in JS bin, we can't actually see that the URL is changing because it's actually the URL of the iframe that they're displaying inside of the actual page. But what we can do is take a look at the, we can take a look bigger at window.application.hash. We can see that right now that hash is empty. And if I go to the chat page, then the hash is going to be chat. So you can see it actually is changing the URL of this frame, the JS bin output frame. Cool. All right, so the next thing we want to do is actually we want to make a custom component. So a lot of, in CanJS, or in most JavaScript frameworks today, you want to break down your application into smaller components that you can kind of assemble together, like Lego blocks or whatever, so that you're not just working on one big thing, you're working on a bunch of small things that you assemble to make your application. So in CanJS, you can create custom components with can component. So that's what we'll do. So where do we want to start? All right, so the first thing that we want to do is for our, right now our chat page is basically all of this stuff. So we want to take all of this and we want to be able to replace it with a new component. I don't remember what chat. We want to be able to create a custom HTML element like this. And start with, for that component, we can just use that same HTML that we had before. Why it wants to indent everything all weird. And we can give this an ID so that we can load it. And we will call this All right. So we can so much space. So so for this component, it's basically it's going to have its own type. So it'll have its own data. So we can create that chat messages. And it's going to be similar to our application view model. This is the view model for our chat messages. So view model means basically it's the model that will be used for the view. Right now, we're not using any dynamic data inside of this, so we just need a define map that doesn't have any properties or any methods for now. We'll add those in. And then the next thing we want to do is create our component. So we'll do the same thing, extend component, and we'll give it, let's say, the tag. So that's basically like what we want to call it is this. I'm going to say its view is going to be the template that we define over here. And then it needs this view. Now, if we run this, hopefully we'll get exactly what we had before. But now, if you're looking, look at this. It's humongous. You can see that our chat messages component is being rendered there, and its content is the template that we did. Cool. So yeah, that's a big part of creating apps. It's breaking down your application into smaller, isolated components that can be tested on their own and can be worked on by different people at the same time without kind of breaking each other's code. All right. So what I want to do next is actually, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, so it's using, I don't remember what the API is, document.register element or something like that internally. This isn't like a true custom element yet because this has been around for a while. But we do, there's a library. We're supported back to IE9, so IE9 and up. But there's another library that's actual true web component custom elements that will probably in the future replace this once web components are supported. But for right now, this is not using it. Okay, so the next step is basically when we click on the messages component, we want to actually see the messages that have been typed. So we're making, probably forgot to show this. This is what we want to end up with. Basically, you have a list of messages. You have a form down at the bottom where you can submit new messages to be displayed. So what we want to work on next is basically this list where we are displaying all of the messages that exist on the server. Cool. So following along, we're down at this list of messages step. So the messages basically have to be returned from the server. So we're going to end up using a promise to do that, or we're going to load them from the server, and we're going to have a promise that's specifying when that data has actually been returned. So in our template, we're going to be able to use that promise. We'll call it messages promise. So you can use promises directly inside of the template, and it'll give you some helpers to know kind of the state of the promise. If you worked the promise before, it can be basically in one of three states, either pending, resolved, or rejected. And we have helpers for all these things. So you can kind of say if messages promise is resolved, this is where we'll kind of show the messages. Then we can do the same thing for pending. Here we'll show messages. This is nice because you basically can show loading indicators and things like that, and you don't have to keep some separate state that's where you're keeping track of whether or not your data's been loaded. You can just look at the actual promise that's returning the data, and you can show like a loading indicator or whatever. And then if it's rejected, you can do the same thing for your error messaging. All right, so this is again a bunch of bootstrap stuff that I don't want to type. So I'm going to paste it in, and then I can talk about it. So yeah, this is kind of the same thing that we were just looking at. If it's pending, we can show an H4 with loading. If it's rejected, we can show the reason, which is basically like the error message that comes back from the server. And then if it's resolved, we can actually use another helper, which is the each helper, to loop through the value that that promise resolved with, which is basically our data, our messages. Use that to loop through, and we can show the name and the body. And then if there aren't any messages, we can show a message. Can't think of another word for it, but we can show that there aren't any messages. Cool. So static up. To make that work, we again want to create another type. That's kind of where everything starts in CanJS, is with these types. We'll create a type for our message, which is basically going to be which is basically going to be the schema of our API. This is like the list of properties that our API is going to return back. You can also add methods and other things on there if you want to, but primarily this will be used to back the data that you get from the server. And then we can also create a list of these, which is going to be define list. So define list is similar to define map. It's a way of creating a list where you can define the properties. For lists, what we want to do is basically, in this case, we have this shorthand, which is the £, which is a way of saying that all of our enumerable properties on this list are going to be messages. So that basically means, like, if you create a new list, you say and then you say list, whatever, 0 equals some object. When you do that, so 0 is an enumerable property on a list. If you were to do like list.each, you would get that back. What's going to happen is it's going to take whatever data you pass here, create an instance of this message, and then store that instead of the actual data. And then we're going to use a library called CanConnect to take this type and connect it with our RESTful API, our server. I'm just going to copy this because there's a bunch of code. All right. We can talk about what this is doing. So here's our message, basically as an ID, which is however the database tracks that. Then the name and the body, and then a date for when this was created. Then our list is just what I just showed, and then this connection is using our this CanConnect supermap to take this message and the list and connect those with this URL. So this will add some methods onto message for retrieving the list of data from the server and creating or saving new data to the server and that kind of stuff, which we'll see in a second. All right, and then once we have that, the last thing we need to do is create this message promise that, or messages promise that we're using over here. So we want to put that on our chat messages VM, which is what's being used to render all this. And we want to give this a default value that we define with this function. And this is basically going to be message.getList. Like I said, this CanConnect is adding some functions to our message object. One of those is getList that you can use to retrieve all of the data from the server. What did I just click? Click that too hard. Okay. All right. So now if I click run, start, the server is too fast. But initially, what will happen is there is actually a loading indicator, and then it's going to, once this message promise resolves, it's going to loop through that data and display each message below. Cool. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is actually be able to create new messages. So we want to create a form that you can use to type in the name and the body, and then save those to the server. So we can put that down here. All right, so we'll have the text input. So earlier I showed, yeah, no, it's okay. Sure.
Okay, so yeah, we're pulling data from the server.
Mhm.
Maybe I missed it. Did we write server code or something, or do we already have this stuff that we're interested in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So CanJS is primarily focused on front end. So we have an existing server that we're using, which is this that gives us back this JSON data.
And that is our instances of messages.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're assuming we have this route then. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of messages in there from before, because this is actually a live app that you can use. And we're going to show, I'll show next how we create new instances. I'm not really going to talk about how the backend is written, because this is primarily focused on CanJS, which is the front end part. But that code is available. If you're interested, I can send you a link to where that code is. It's using a library called Feathers.js, which is a way to create API layers with, it's very easy to add real time, which is one of the things we're going to have in a minute. So plug for them. All right. So like I was saying, so these parentheses are a way of handling events, and then this dollar, like I was saying, is a DOM event. So we can also do binding to attributes, and that's with curly braces like this, and then we can do two-way binding, which is basically the attribute will update the data, and the data will update the attribute by adding the parentheses back. So we want to two-way bind our value to the name property. So it's going to two-way bind to this name. And then we also want to have another text input for the body. Submit button. And then we could add a click handler. So to handle when the user actually submits the form, we could add a click handler to the submit, but then we'd run into problems if people hit the enter button, because that would also submit the form. So what we actually want to do is create a handler for submit on the form. And then this. Let's send. And then we want to call this send function that we're going to write. And we pass it the event, which is like the actual DOM event that gets fired. And the reason for that is so that we can prevent the default from happening, so that it won't try to do a post or whatever separately. So I'm actually going to copy this, because it looks prettier. All right, so then once we have the HTML written, the other thing that we will need to do is actually create these properties, and create the name and the body and this send function. So our name and body are both just strings. And then we're going to have that function send, which takes an event. I mentioned it's going to be a quick functions. And then the only other thing that this needs to do is create a new message. So this is going to say the message. It's going to pass it the data that we have. And And then we want to actually save that to the server. So far, if we just do this, that's just going to create a message in memory. It doesn't actually do anything. So if we click I'll save on that, and that will actually save to the server. That's one thing I forgot to mention before. So yeah, we looked at this get list earlier. So that CanConnect supermap adds some other functions to our message object, like get if we wanted to get a single message, and then save if we want to create a new message and save it. And then also destroy if you want to delete a record from the database. It's all the kind of CRUD operations get added. So this is going to return back promise. So once the message gets saved to the server, all we really want to do is empty out the body of this so you can type in a new message with your same name. So let's say this body is an empty string. If this will work, I have to change this. So I'm using this arrow function so I don't have to mess with this binding of this callback. And so we need to use, you can set JSBin to use Babel to actually transpile that, which is kind of nice. Cool. So if we run this, go to our chat page. Now at the bottom we have the name and name and message. So I can put a name and say, like that, and then see that gets saved. And so that's nice. We didn't have to actually push anything into this list. CanConnect under the hood is automatically managing that list for us. So when we call save, it knows that this is part of the same data that we retrieved with this get list call, and it will automatically manage that for you and add it to the list so it gets displayed in your page, which is pretty nice. Yeah. So these methods are assuming, they're always like this, basically. So they're assuming that your API server kind of conforms to the RESTful API standards. There's ways around it, like you can overwrite some of the underlying functions so that if like your API actually returns back an object with a data property or whatever instead of an actual array, you can kind of merge that to make it work correctly. But yeah, they're standard. Cool. All right, so the last thing that we want to do is enable real time so that if new messages come in, they actually get pushed into the page so we can actually, if somebody else is working along and they type something, it'll show up on my screen, or if I type, it'll show up on theirs. Or if I have two tabs side by side, we'll see both the messages. So to do this, our API is set up to use socket.io, so it's going to send some WebSocket messages when new messages are created or changed or destroyed. So I'm just going to copy this part because it's super simple. And I like copying stuff. And then it works fine. All right, so what we're going to do is create a new socket connection using socket.io, and then we're going to listen for these specific messages. So our API server is going to send a messages created, messages updated, and messages removed. And then when these things happen, we're going to use the underlying connection of the message to create an instance of a message or update an instance or destroy an instance. And that's really all you need to do to get real-time working with CanJS and CanConnect. So if I save this, hopefully this will work. All right, got two of these side by side. Check this in real time. Send this, you can see it actually showed up in this other tab, which is separate. If any of you have worked along. Hopefully you're seeing these messages created on yours also. And that's it. That's all you need to do to set up real time. And that is all you need to create a chat application, real-time chat application with CanJS. That's all I got. Anybody have any questions? Nope. Cool. Well, I'm going to stand here for a little while if anyone wants to ask questions more privately.
All right, thanks, sir.
All right.
We're gonna hang around. Some of us usually go to drinks afterwards.
Yeah.
Hang around for that.
Yeah, I am.
So if you have questions, you can do that there. And that's all we have. So I'll see you guys next month for the Phillips meeting.
Cool. If you're interested in like training content or whatever, there's a link down there that you can sign up for spam emails or not spam emails. You can sign up for emails about training content. So cool. Thanks.
You guys actually.